Europeans assume that you're arrogant because you're American. That's the assumption. And they also assume that you're dumb. So one of them is probably true. It is true. You don't really know that much about Europe, but you can prove the other one false.
Hey, I'm here with Trey Shaw from Budapest, Hungary. We're meeting today to talk about effective partnerships. So the reason is we desire to see movements of the gospel throughout the cities of Europe. To that end, we desire to work broadly around the gospel to see our cities transformed. Specifically, we're meeting because we want to help foreign church planners or people who call themselves missionaries and local church planners or leaders in the cities of Europe form meaningful partnerships. For somebody who would be watching this, can you kind of introduce yourself? What do you do? Who do you work with?
I guess I have two main things that I do. One is the church that we planted, Agora. We planted a second one out of that one, I guess about 18 months ago. And so I lead that church with a couple of other guys. It's going. We're doing pretty well. And the other thing that I do is working with CTC Hungary, which we became officially a part of City to City last year. I'm one of the instructors in the incubator and on the leadership team for the network. And so those are the two things that I spend my time doing.
How long have you been in Hungary?
With IMB, 14 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 14 years. We were the different organization first, but really since '98, we've been either in Hungary or working towards being back in Hungary. So
wow, so like about 20,
a little over 20 years. Yeah.
So you've probably had some different experiences coming alongside and being a part of partnership within your own country. You've been there 20 years. So what's that look like in stages?
Yeah, well, obviously when you get in a country where English is not the native language, then, well, in Hungary, your first 4 or 5 years until you learn the language well enough to be able to really work in the language, you're pretty limited with who you can work with. But that being said, because it is English that we speak, most people are going to speak some English, so you're not that limited. You're maybe in the amount of ministry that you can do, but in the number of partners, not so much. But you do have to be limited in what you, in your expectations of what you can do. You really have to kind of just be willing to be kind of just a low-level worker. I guess that's the best way to put it. And so that's really what we did for the first probably 3.5, 4 years. We plugged into a local church. We just went, and then gradually as our Hungarian got better, we started leading in different ministries and helping them start a couple of ministries. And after the, I guess, 4th year, I was actually a leader in the church, recognized elder in the church. And so it was just a progression.
Right now you're working with the guy, David. How did that come about? Like, what was the turning point where you guys said, all right, let's do something together?
Well, so the church that we plugged into in 2006, he was one of the pastors. He was the lead pastor of that church. So we just really developed a friendship over time. It started out just being friends. We didn't have any idea because he already had this ministry and we were learning Hungarian. And then on our first stateside, he basically in 2008, he left the ministry altogether. Yeah, so we didn't really know what was going to happen. But looking back, I can see that God, was leading him away from the church he was in, mainly because it was never going to be a church that was going to plant anything else. It was going to be content to just kind of exist. And so in the kind of, I guess, crisis that he was going through, he left that church and was just kind of on his own. He was still doing ministry, but with a student group, parachurch thing. And so then about 1.5 years later, I guess it was probably, about early 2009, we both realized our friendship had stayed. We both realized that God was leading us to do something like plant a church. So we just started meeting and talking and praying. Did that for about 6 months. And then the middle of 2010, we started a church planning team. We started gathering people. that were interested in, and then we launched in October of 2010.
So when you guys came together, was there like a discussion of, hey, we're doing this together, or this is like a 50-50 thing, or hey, I'm coming along to support you, or what did that look like?
I don't know. Sometimes if you define things, you kill them.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't really set out to define anything, because then, yeah, for a lot of reasons, I just think it can be a bad idea to try and label everything. No, I mean, it was two guys who really didn't know what they were doing. So it wasn't like me coming in and going, okay, I know what I'm doing. I've spoken the language for 18 months now, so, you listen to me. I don't know. It was just really a product of our friendship and our both of us on the path that God had us on to do this. So I guess you could say 50-50, but it was way more than that. I mean, there were times where it was, 90-10 for one of us. There was a period where he left to go study at Oxford. Mm-hmm. So for 10 months, that was all me. And then right when he came back, we went on a 6-month stateside. And so then it was all him. So I don't know. I don't ever think in terms of I'm here to teach somebody how to church plant, or even I'm here just to learn how to church plant. You're going to do a mix of both. And you use your gifts and you just do what God says. And sometimes you're leading and sometimes you're following. It just depends on what he's telling you to do.
Sounds like you're describing like a real partnership.
It was a real friendship. I mean, to this day, we say that, and we tell people that, the church is kind of a product of our friendship more than anything. So, that kind of limit, if you're a new missionary and you're like, oh, how do I plant a church with a partner? You can't fake friendship. You can't just randomly start friendship. So, I mean, it was all God. I mean, he connected us together almost immediately. I mean, for kind of really the first time we met each other, it just clicked. Partnership, friendship. You can put the label on it. You're the smart guy.
No, that sounds good. I mean, you put the labels on stuff.
No, okay. After I said don't do that.
A lot of partnerships, friendships between local church planners and leaders and foreigners, they end in disappointment. Or worse, they end in conflict or destruction. They say everybody goes through 4 stages, like always, like listener, learner, storyteller, sage. So I don't know if you like 20 years, you probably like at the sage level of, like being in Europe and like you've got something to give. What are some tips that you would have?
Well, I'm a huge believer in that what you believe is going to dictate how you live your life and what your ministry is going to look like. And even simple, and I'm a big believer in confessing truths, because as you confess them, then you tend to live that. If you don't want to be a hypocrite. It sounds totally cliche, but even the thought, especially if you're a new missionary, of how do you phrase where you are? Do you live in Germany, or do you live with Germans? Mm-hmm. It's two completely different things. And it sounds, oh, well, it's not really that big of a deal, but it is. If you can really frame where you are, even in the sense of I'm not in a place, I'm with a people. And if you can do that, then it changes. I mean, in my life, it changed everything. Because then I wasn't really concerned about the place. I was concerned about, well, why do Hungarians think this? And then it changes your target from the place where you are. And then you have kind of a nameless, faceless mass of people. And then you can make all kinds of sociological and anthropological studies that don't really mean anything because you're not dealing with real people. Or you can start really thinking about real people, in your immediate circle, and figuring out why they're afraid of this or why they laugh at that. And cliches tend to be true if you follow them, if they're, if you make it a part of your life. I mean, this is literally what we did. We decided we're not going to talk about we live in Hungary. We live with Hungarians. And so then if you say that, then you really have to be about the business of living with Hungarians. So when it comes to friendships, you try and put yourself in a position where you're going to have more likely to be friends with Hungarians, in our case, rather than, other foreigners. The other thing is, you have to recognize how stupid you are when you get to the field. If you don't do that, then you don't really have any chance of having much effective ministry. It may look effective to you, but as soon as your back is turned, if you could record the people that, the nationals that live there, you'd be surprised what they have to say. So you just have to realize very quickly you don't really know that much. And even everything, the stuff you do know about church planning and this and that, it may not be at all applicable to where you are. So you have to really believe you don't know anything, because as soon as you can do that, then you can start learning. And so we treated that first 3.5, 4 years in that first church as learning how to be a Hungarian Christian. Like, what does it mean to be a Hungarian Christian? And so we watched, we first year and a half, we couldn't understand half of what was going on. Yeah, I mean, the first 3 years, especially before our first stateside, I mean, we wanted to see what does it mean to be a Hungarian Christian, in a small church, because most churches are small. This was a non-state church, which we weren't going to be working for the state church, so we could learn that, how they worship, how they teach, what's good, what's bad about the teaching, all that kind of stuff. You just can't learn unless you're willing to sit there and soak it in for as long as God tells you, and it may be a long time. I can hear objections because people say, "Oh, I'm not getting paid to go to church," and we didn't just go to church. I mean, I agree with that. You don't get paid to go to church. As we would always volunteer to help with anything. If there was a need, then we would jump in, we would help. And so the things that we brought from our American church culture, the healthy things, they're only like 5 or 6, but we brought those with us. That's a joke. They're like 7. We tried, as far as volunteering, as far as helping, teaching the kids especially. And then as we got more comfortable, we would help them start new ministries. English outreaches, like weekly, not just like a camp, but like weekly stuff. We started a coffee house on the street, and this was all before we were really church planting. But it was all just practice, and that was all coming from a point of we knew I'm sure there are ways to plant churches in Europe. That's just how God used us. But I think that the principle is the same. Maybe stupidity is too harsh. You really have to be humble. Europeans assume that you're arrogant because you're American. That's the assumption. And they also assume that you're dumb. So one of them is probably true. It is true. You don't really know that much about Europe, but you can prove the other one false by being humble and not being an arrogant, dumb American. Just be a humble, dumb American, because then they'll love you. They want to help you. The humility goes a long way in church planting in Europe.
Would you say a lot of those things were like a preparation?
I would look at it more as, to whom much is given, much is required. He doesn't really give you a lot in the beginning, but if you're faithful with that, then he'll put you into a different position. And if you're faithful in that, then he'll put you into a different position. And then pretty soon you're planting a church, because you've been faithful with, humility and learning and submitting to, local churches and that kind of thing. And so then you've proven you're a good model to follow. It's not so much planning, it's just walking step by step and doing what God's calling you to do. And then you find yourself deeper and deeper, into the process. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I had a meeting last week, and I was talking to the guy who's head of our CTC Hungary, awesome guy. And I said, I still am in shock that I'm sitting at a table here with you strategizing about, a gospel movement in Budapest. And it's me and you. Like this, I said, this doesn't make any sense. And I said, I'm glad it makes sense to you, because it doesn't to me. And it's not because I have especially more to offer than, some other person, foreigner or Hungarian. It's just that that's where God put me. And it was just a progression of steps. It wasn't the target. My target was never to be on, CTC Hungary leadership team. My target was just to be faithful. And again, it's cliche, but there are no shortcuts. It takes a long time, and you really have to be serious. and really committed that, God's real and God's true, and do what he says.
I talked to Andras, and I mentioned that I knew you, and I said something that I think he didn't understand me the first time, so I said it again, and I said something like, Trey, the American. And he looked at me funny, and he said, oh, Trey's not American, he's Hungarian. So anyway, that was like...
Yeah, he's very kind. It's not true.
In some ways, that's a kind of like the best compliment, because it doesn't necessarily speak to, skills and all that kind of stuff, but it really does speak to, I have done like the foundational stuff that I need to do to be used by God here. Just as important as kind of to-dos in partnership is probably also in friendship partnership with local people, or vice versa, are things not to do. What would be maybe some challenges or things that you would say, like, don't do this or don't be like this?
The way you build partnerships is a lot like the way you evangelize in Europe. If you just, talk to a random person on the street or the coffee shop, whatever, and share the gospel, they might respond, but it's pretty rare. But where if you can establish a relationship and over time they see who you are and that kind of thing, this is evangelism in Europe, it's just basic stuff. I would say partnership is literally the same thing. If you go in, I've seen it a million times, because we have network meetings and you'll be a new, American missionary, and they'll come in, they'll immediately want to plug the program that their organization does and this and that and this and that with zero relationship. Hungarians are polite, very polite, and they'll say, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, maybe we can talk about it. But I know that means in Hungarian, that means, well, we're never going to talk about this because I don't know who you are and you don't care who I am, obviously, because you're just telling me a bunch of stuff that I need to be doing. So you have to do the hard work of relationship to build partnerships. There is no other way around it. And that just means you got to hang out with people, go to coffee, talk, find out, meet another pastor for coffee and don't even talk about anything about yourself. That'll, that will freak them out. Just listen to them, ask them questions, find out, they have kids, they have a wife, where are they from? In most of the big cities, most people, in Frankfurt or Budapest or wherever, they're not from Frankfurt. Usually they're from outside of that. And so you find, where'd you come from? Oh, a village. You're not trying to trick them into working with you. You're really establishing a relationship. Hopefully you're not using them for your own sake. But if you just equate building partnerships with the way you do evangelism in Europe, it's pretty much the same thing. Without relationships, you're really fighting an uphill battle in Europe. That, and there aren't relationships in Europe. People have very few real relationships. So if you can be a model in how to form friendships and relationships, then they're definitely going to want to work with you because you provided something that they didn't have in their life to begin with. And I've seen that a lot just in our network, not just with me, but the way the network works. You just get to know people and, you're not a weird Baptist anymore. You're just a normal Christian guy who doesn't dunk their babies,
Why do you care about this issue?
Primarily because I think it's one of the most neglected commandments of Jesus that he gave us, to live in unity. I mean, we love the high priestly prayer and we love to look at the Christological aspects and, the unity of the Father and the Son. But, there's a big part of that that's talking to us. And if we neglect working on unity in the body, and that means working on unity with Christians who do weird stuff in our eyes, one, it's bad missiology. It's not going to get you anywhere. But two, it's just it's sin. I don't know how else to put it. If you're not doing what Jesus says, he's not winking at you. He's calling it sin. So we need to also. So that's really the reason for me. I just see it as part of my commission from Jesus to disciple people and to build unity. You can't really be neutral, because if you're not working to build unity, then you're working to not build unity. There is no passivity. To be passive is to be actively working against it. So you really have to take it seriously. Partnership is a very good thing to do, and it brings amazing blessings into your own life. You're learning things, you're changing. you become a different person, a better person through partnerships.
Thanks so much that you took your time today to share your experiences, your perspective. And I believe that what you shared today will help somebody else, maybe who's at the very beginning and trying to figure out how to navigate partnerships or friendships or even what all that means. You did a good job of telling us about that. And also, I think this could also be really helpful for somebody who maybe has been here for a long time in Europe and is still really struggling or has plateaued and they really need some new inspiration.
Thank you. Yeah, it's my pleasure. And if I'm helpful, that's good.
All right.
Yeah.
See you later.
All right. See ya.
Bye.